Brody Mihocek is jumping just over the road and is heading to play for the Melbourne Football Club. But what does this departure mean for Collingwood? Is it good news for the renaissance of their list, or is this potentially a little bit of pain heading their way? On the other side of the coin, is this exactly what Melbourne need? And from a fantasy football perspective, whether you play AFL Fantasy and SuperCoach, we want to help you decide whether or not Brody is as a player, or the moves that surround this trade bring any fantasy relevance for us in 2026. Hello, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I do hope you're enjoying this series so far. Every single player that moves as a trade or a free agent, we are reviewing them in 2025. It's a pretty great story when you think of it, of how he got into the AFL, came as a defender, and now has turned himself into a more than reliable forward, it's safe to say. Got that really nice set of power about him, not explosive by any means, but certainly doesn't lag the feet when out on a mark, and takes some really nice contested footy marks. And not just those where he's out on the leads, got some aerial skills about him. Again, I wouldn't say it's his top weapon, but his strength and his ability to create space and clunk a really nice mark and then ultimately convert them into scoreboard impacts is what has made Melbourne so attracted to trading for him, and why Collingwood for such a long period of time have had him as one of their central pieces for their forward line. He's a really nice piece, Brody, it's safe to say. But what does this departure mean from a Melbourne Football Club perspective? Maybe we should start there. I think it adds a nice bit of reliability that, frankly, since 2021, I haven't really looked at the Melbourne forward line with any sense of venom in their team, let alone any sense of consistency and predictability. And then the players that have started to show moments of consistency have ended up deploying themselves into other positions across the field, most notably a Petrarca or a Keziah Pickett, have ended up picking up more midfield time throughout that stretch of years. But so much of this Melbourne forward line is volatile and chaotic that hoped to Jacob Van Rooyen would have come on, and he's still got time on his side, but he hasn't really emerged in the timeline that I think Demons fans had hoped to date. Bailey Fritsch was meant to be the X factor, third tall, can get out on a lead, can crumb, but can also take an overhead mark. And he's shown still some decent spurts and moments, but again, has kind of fallen off that consistency radar. So a player like Mihocek, who is really reliable in a bunch of these different areas, I think for those two guys that I just mentioned, just add some extra, not only depth in terms of scoring options on game day, but just another target that can attract a good key position defender, that can attract the ball and can convert in front of the sticks. So while he's not in the age profile that I do believe Melbourne would ideally want to be looking at, he becomes a little bit of a bridge player that gives some more of their youngsters that they currently have, like a Tholstrup, a little bit more time to develop, a Van Rooyen, a little bit more time where he doesn't always have to have the number one key position defender on him. I feel like it's a bridge move for him, whereas for Mio, I think Checkers gets a little bit of extra time in the AFL system, probably a little bit of extra money and a little bit of extra job security. So I see why for these two, it created quite a nice match for them to be able to do it. Again, it just has to jump over the road to train, so it's fine from that perspective. Collingwood, I'm not as optimistic for you about this. And Collingwood fans, come at me if you're watching this on YouTube. Come at me in the comments, because I'm up for being proven wrong or testing my theory is wrong. Please come and let me know. But I'm nervous for you about this trade move. And again, reason it's a trade to not dilute compensation for Melbourne with the Spargo free agency move. But so much of Collingwood's goals this year and their scoreboard impacts and their threat as a team that could kick a winning score and not just defend came through Jamie Elliott, 60 goals this year and clear and supreme away from anybody else. Then they had only two other players that kicked 30-plus goals this year. One was a Tim Membry. The other, who's their number 2 goal scorer this year, Brody Mihocek. We take this player out of the mix, and all of a sudden, it's a Jamie Elliott forward line right now. And if you could shut down Jamie, you probably stop Collingwood from kicking a winning score. Now, they might be able to defend a grind out 60 to 57 type game, and that's a whole nother conversation. But there are two players for Collingwood that must elevate themselves to their capacity and capabilities. Otherwise, I am nervous for the Collingwood Football Club being able to consistently kick winning scores. Yeah, okay, Membry's around. I feel like he's a 1.2 to 1.3 goals per game kind of guy. Elliott is the absolute ace in that forward line, and there's nobody on the list that will dislodge that, and nobody that, based on what their draft capital is right now, that should move that, let alone anyone that I believe is available in the trade window that has been linked to them. Kerno would be lovely, wouldn't he, friends? But these are the two players I got for you. Bobby Hill and Dan McStay. I think these are the two guys that must play towards their potential in 2026 for Collingwood to continue to maintain being that premiership threat. Yes, they've got a great system. They've got some elite players in most lines of the field. They're really well coached. They've got some really nice pieces. None of those things I'm questioning, but rather I'm saying Bobby Hill must get maybe not to Norm Smith caliber for the whole year. That would be amazing, wouldn't it, though, Pies fans? But he's got to play to his potential and not just average a goal a game type of a small. We've got to see him start getting back over that 30 to 40 goals per game to be able to protect not only the loss of Mihocek, but add another dimension in the forward 50. The other is a Dan McStay. Went down in horrible injuries, that's really robbed him of getting some grand final berths and premierships over the last couple of years. But I just think he's got to kick on here because Mason Cox is not the answer. Membry is a fine third piece, but you need a marking presence inside forward 50. And McStay has shown in spurts at Brisbane before he changed clubs and at spurts at Collingwood, probably mostly before that significant injury, that he could be that player. He can be that player for you. He has to be, because as much as they might be able to jag something in the draft or an SSP or something like that, it has to be those two, as far as I'm concerned, that elevate themselves. Otherwise, for Collingwood, I'm nervous at your ability when you come up against teams that can put on 90, 100, 110 plus points per game. I'm nervous that you can match it with them if it ever got to a shootout, and rather you'd have to compress the game to really make it a victory for you. That's my nervousness for you, Collingwood, about this trade. I see why Mio went. I see why you're happy to have, to a degree, let him go, using that term loosely. But yeah, I'm a little bit, not going to lie, a little bit anxious for you, Collingwood fans. But let me know in the comments if I'm off on this one. What's the fantasy footy implications? Well, you've got to go back to 2019 for him personally to have averaged anything over 70 plus. And it was a one-time season across the formats. He's regularly around sort of mid-50s to mid-60s. And in Classic, unless you're priced at a basement level, you're just not interested in a player of that scoring level. So he's absolutely out in Classic. And in Draft, I don't mind him, depending on the depth of squad on the keeper platform, how many you need to pick. So I think that's okay. It's probably more likely to be a daily fantasy pick that you're looking at. And again, McStay and Hill and these sort of guys that it's going to create opportunities for, I don't think they benefit from a fantasy level in a space that in Classic or salary cap that we've benefited from. And the same over at Melbourne. I don't think his arrival does anything directly for fantasy football. So a lot to look at for us for sure, but not a fantasy relevant player, nor the surrounding pieces as a result of his move. But do you disagree with me on that? Do you think there's something that I'm missing? I'd love to know. You can comment below and let me know. If you're watching this on YouTube and enjoying the series and you haven't subscribed to the channel or liked this video, make sure you do. It's a small thing it takes to you, but it's a huge impact for us here at the Coach's Panel. So I'd greatly appreciate you doing it. If you're listening to this as an audio podcast and you haven't given us a 5-star rating, make sure you do. We're the only content creator at the moment that is dropping a daily video for you, a player episode every time they move clubs. We've got you covered this off-season, friends, for your fantasy footy content. So please jump on there, give us a like, give us a 5-star rating, and let us know your thoughts on what your early plans are for the 2026 preseason. Hey, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back again real soon with another player that's moved clubs this trade and free agency period.